This year in my 2025 garden, I will not be growing peas. Now for the last few years, this is kind of one thing I'd been debating about with myself of like, should I plant the peas or should I not? Because for my current context, they're not necessarily a great fit. But first off, the other month I did drop some new merch, including these pretty cool hats. So if you want to help support the channel and have a cool hat, feel free to check out some of the merch down below. Anyway, so typically in my area, this is the time of year when we start to think about planting peas. They are a cool weather crop, so they usually get planted out in the ground in March or April. We have different types of peas. We have winter peas, snap peas, shelling peas. Those are the three typical types of garden peas that people will commonly grow, and this year I will not be growing any of those. Now in previous videos I have done videos on the hardy winter pea, which is bred for more as a cover crop, not so much an edible crop. So I will still be growing that because it has a whole bunch of different uses and different applications, and you're growing it typically at a different time of the year. But when it comes to food production during the growing season, I think I have in this case anyway, better options available. And I also want to say that garden peas, whether they're shelling, snap, or winter, they have been one of my favorite vegetables to eat. They have a really great taste. So it's not that I inherently don't like peas, I'm just trying to be more efficient and effective with my gardening. So the last few years when I've grown peas, I've had a lot of crop loss from browse, from like small mammal pressure, like rabbits, mouse, vole, rat, those types of things. They seem to find the plants completely irresistible. Now, if you have rabbits as being a main problem, then you can usually just take like a piece of muslin or whatever and use it as like a fence around the peas or some similar thing, and that will usually do a pretty good job of helping to keep the rabbits out, right? But it's definitely not going to stop you know, mouse or vole or, you know, let alone rats, right? So that's been one thing that's been a little disheartening for me, is all of the animal pressure, particularly on the peas, especially because they're being planted earlier in the season before a lot of other stuff comes up. And so that's one of the first and most luscious food growth that they can find that's available. So they're gonna go for it. The pea plants also, per my experience, seem to not be highly productive even when they are left alone from small mammals, you know, at least compared to other plants that I could grow in those areas, like you know, parsnips or turnips or even dry beans, right? They just seem to produce more food and also more energy dense food that's at the end of the day or at the end of the season is just going to be more fulfilling for me to harvest and to use. And so for the amount of space that these peas take up, I just feel that I can use that space more efficiently to produce more food from the same amount of land by growing other crops other than peas. And then finally, I just don't really have enough space, right? I have a limited garden size right now, so I have to really kind of be judicious with what types of crops I'm going to grow and what types of crops I'm going to leave out. Like I said, if I had more space, I'd probably continue to grow the peas, right? And I might make sure that I grow them in an area that's open enough so that the small mammal pressure doesn't become an issue, right? Because part of the problem is that the garden that I'm at now is so condensed. So I have like big brushy plants combined with like smaller plants, and I have a mix of perennials and annuals. Some of these plants do really well and others just have a really tough time, especially when it comes to small animal browse, because some of those perennials or even larger annuals later in the season, because everything's all kind of squashed together, oftentimes just provides all this cover for these small animals to be able to escape predation and have a safe haven and a bunch of food available during that time as well. But with more space, it would be easier to provide the certain crops that need that extra open space in order to be productive and not get chomped down to the ground by some animal, right? By some small animal. So even though I'm not going to be growing peas and kind of feel sad about that, but it does open up the opportunity for me to grow a bunch of other crops. As I kind of stated earlier, crops like cauliflower I want to grow more of, dry beans I really want to concentrate on for their food value, their protein and energy value. I'm also going to be trying sweet potatoes again, so probably look for some more videos on that in the coming weeks and months. And then also some other crops like collards and whole bunch of other plants, right? More space for squash. And even though some of these plants get planted later, not the cauliflower or the collards, but some of these other plants like dry bean, sweet potato and stuff do get planted later in the season when the peas are either at peak production or close to, or they're beginning to die back. It really opens up more space, right? Because I usually try to let the peas go as long as possible, and then I try to collect the seeds at the end of the season so I can grow them the next year, right? So the pea plants end up needing that extra space and that extra time to be able to produce those viable, mature seeds. Now, in the past, I have combined the peas with the cauliflower, but this time I think I'm going to change the cauliflower up. I might plant that with some of the garlic, and then I also might plant some cauliflower with some other plants, maybe some salsify or something like that. We'll kind of cross that bridge when we get there. So overall, I'm not going to be growing the peas this year in 2025. I'm going to be really bearing down on more staple crops, nutrient and energy dense crops, and I will be able to grow more plants like parsnips and squash. Plants in the past that I haven't been able to grow quite so much of, just because I'm trying to juggle all these plants in, you know, the limited amount of space that I have. So, and parsnips are, by the way, another crop that typically get planted earlier in the season, right? I've planted them even as early as December into February, right? Whenever the ground has some time to thaw a little bit, and I can just sneak some seeds in the ground before it freezes over again. The parsnips seem to do the best when they get planted during that time. So that way I can have more space to plant those parsnips earlier on in the season, and that way I don't have to worry about fitting in peas or anything like that, right? I might even be able to combine the parsnips with the cauliflower, since the cauliflower will grow earlier in the season, right? And get big early, and then die back, and then the parsnips will really come in mid to late summer, right, and mature into the fall. So thank you so much for checking out this video, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.